Okay, so here's the outline for the second half of this. We're going to talk about hydrogen bonding, three-dimensional shape, form follows function. In other words, why the shape of molecules matters. The properties of water that are responsible for life, and then a explanation of hydrophobic versus hydrophilic. Okay, so hydrogen bonding. We spoke about it just a second ago. Um, what are we looking at? We're looking at a molecule that has hydrogen in it, of course, and it has an electronegative atom. And I told you those atoms could be nitrogen, oxygen, and fluorine, but in life there isn't a lot of use for fluorine, so we truncated back to nitrogen and oxygen. Okay. Um, it's very important for you to understand that hydrogen bonding is important in how DNA and in particular proteins fold. Okay, proteins fold in a very specific manner due to their electrostatic interactions. Some of these have to do with hydrogen bonding. Some of it has to do with opposite charges. Some of it has to do with partial opposite charges. But if these were not in the right place, then these amino acids would not fold into proteins correctly, and DNA would not fold correctly. Okay, so hydrogen bonds is an important precursor to the proper function of DNA and proteins. Okay, hydrogen bond typically has to do the hydrogen between one molecule and the oxygen of another molecule. Okay, or the hydrogen of one molecule and the nitrogen, unsure nitrogen of a neighboring molecule. Okay. Hydrogen bonding is a cause of cohesion. What is cohesion? Cohesion is the association of water molecules with water molecules. This is why they stick to each other, because of hydrogen bonding. So here's your water molecule, and you can see that the hydrogen of one molecule associated with the oxygen of the other, because this one has a partial positive charge and this one has a partial negative charge. Okay. And one of the things that's interesting is that in water, uh, this hydrogen bonding is interacting, but because of the dynamic nature of the water molecules, those molecules are relatively close together. But as the temperature falls and these molecules are forced to maintain a certain orientation, the hydrogen bonding forces a crystalline lattice that causes the water molecules to literally separate from each other. And why is this important? Because water is one of the few liquids out there where the density actually goes down as it freezes. Most other liquids, as the temperature goes down, the density increases. Water is the opposite. As the temperature goes down, the dynamic nature of water causes a crystalline structure that decreases the density of water. Do we care? Yeah, we care, because what ends up happening in life is that ice and cold water end up functioning as insulation for ecosystems, and it ends up keeping essential heat in the ecosystem. And this is yet one more reason why water is a precursor to life. Okay. Okay, the three-dimensional shape of a molecule. Your author is kind of terse with this, but effectively, one example that he gives is, hey, if you're smelling something, right, the neurons in your cribriform plate in your nasal passage has a very specific shape. And when odor molecules of that same shape associate with that receptor, then that receptor goes, aha, this is what I'm smelling, and it sends a signal up. Well, actually, that's not true. That receptor is specific to a particular type of smell, and it sends a signal to the brain, and the brain is the one that goes, aha, we're smelling delicious warm bread. Okay. But in order for this to happen, you have to have a receptor. I don't know if you're noticing this. It's a little bit subtle. Okay. It's a little bit subtle. But the author has a bunch of receptors here. These two are the same. There's a third, a fourth, and a fifth here. Okay. And here's the bread molecules coming out, which are little triangles, and they can only associate with these two receptors because the shapes are complementary to each other. It cannot associate with this one. It cannot associate with this one. It cannot associate with this one. So consequently, only those receptors that have complementary shapes to those odor molecules will be able to associate with those odor molecules and subsequently send a signal to the brain going, delicious bread. These two cannot do it. These three cannot do it. Okay. So all this to say that the three-dimensional shape of this odor molecule and the three-dimensional shape of this receptor are important, because if they are not complementary to each other, this event is not going to take place. Okay. Right now, we're dealing with a pandemic of SARS COVID-19, and we are trying to use antibodies because the way that that virus enters the host is very similar to this. The virus has a little molecule, okay, and that molecule is complementary to certain receptors in our cells. And when that molecule attaches to the receptor, it allows the virus to enter the host. So how do you prevent the virus from entering? You make an antibody that's complementary to that viral molecule, and it attaches to the viral molecule, stopping the molecule from attaching to the receptor and therefore entering the host. Okay. Interestingly, our bodies are the ones doing that. So we are harvesting, as we read last week, we're harvesting quite a bit of antibodies from people that have been sick in an effort to combat SARS-CoV-19 with antibodies that recognize the docking proteins from the virus. So again, form follows function. Okay, form follows function. If a molecule has a particular shape, is because it needs to have that shape in order to carry out its job. So the three-dimensional shape of a molecule is incredibly important. Okay, we're jumping over to water and life. Okay, water. We've been looking for life in other planets. We've been looking for life on Mars. How are we looking for life? We're looking for water. If there's water, the probability of life is great. If there is no water, the probability for life, not so great. So at the end of the day, water is an essential precursor to life. Why? Well, because of the following items. First of all, is a solution. What does this mean? This means that as a solution, it can take a solute, a compound, and dissolve it within itself. Okay, so a solution is a homogeneous mixture of two or more kinds of molecules, atoms, or ions. Okay, the solution is made out of the compound that is dissolved in solution, which is the solute, and the compound doing the dissolving, which is the solvent. So water is a powerful solvent. Okay, and it's essential that it can be a solvent so it can dissolve a lot of solutes in a very small amount of space to form a solution. Sounds boring, doesn't it? But it's not. What's going on here is that at the end of the day, our bodies are literally trillions upon trillions of chemical reactions. In order for a chemical reaction to take place, chemicals, solutes, have to be able to get together and find each other and dissolve and dissociate and come together. And the product of one reaction is usually the reactant of the next reaction. And the product of that reaction is going to be the reactant of the next reaction. So everything that we're doing can be 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 different chemical reactions in a row. And if we did not have a good solvent like water that can dissolve a great amount of solute in a very small volume, our cells would not be able to carry out these chemical reactions. So water being a powerful solvent is very, very essential to the chemical reactions that are taking place in our body. Okay. Oh, now my keyboard worked. That was really strange. Why is water such a powerful solvent? Well, here, let me move this out of the way. Here we're going to look at sodium chloride. We just finished covering the sodium chloride is an ionic compound. It's table salt, right? It says sodium chloride, positively charged sodium ions are attracted to the water's negatively charged oxygen atoms, while its negatively charged chloride ions are attracted to water's positively charged hydrogen atoms. How boring, right? Absolutely not. Think for a second. Every nerve in your body uses what's called a sodium potassium pump. Okay? If the neurons in your body could not use sodium potassium pumps, your nerves would not have this beautiful thing called an action potential. This action potential is necessary for you to think, it's necessary for you to move your body, it's necessary for you to breathe, it's necessary for you to digest and assimilate food. The epithelium of your small and large intestine have a plethora of sodium potassium pump channels. Okay. Imagine if we did not have a solvent powerful enough to separate sodium from chlorine or sodium from potassium. We would not be able to function. How is water able to do this? By the fact that it is a strongly polar covalent bond. The polarity of water is what allows it to separate negatively and positively charged ions away from each other. And as a consequence of that, you and I are able to think, walk, breathe, run, study for a biology test, think, exist. So trivial, right? But it's not. This polar character of water is incredibly important. It's what allows us to have ions in our body to be separated from each other. And now my keyboard doesn't work. I love how computers choose to work or not work whenever they want to. I think it's funny. Anyways, like now. Anyways, so it's a powerful solvent. It has the ability to dissolve more compounds in greater amounts than any other liquid. That's another way of saying it is a powerful solvent. And why? Again, because it is a strongly polar covalent liquid, which allows it to separate ions that are strongly attracted to each other. Okay, because of water solid form, ice is less dense than its liquid form. Bodies of water in colder climates do not freeze solid in the winter. and allows life to flourish under the ice. Okay, so I just finished addressing this. So look at liquid water. See how close the water molecules are? But as water freezes, it forms a crystal lattice, and that is dictated by its hydrogen bonding. So you can see that this hydrogen is attached to this oxygen, and this hydrogen is attached to this oxygen, and so forth. But as ice forms, the water molecules literally move away from each other. So the density of ice is less than that of water. Now, some of you who used to live here a long time ago might think that's not a great thing, Eleazar, because I remember my water pipes rupturing during the winter because of this. And that's true. But small potatoes to what it does to the rest of the world. See this cute little seal right here? This cute little seal right here is happy because it has a cover of ice above it. That ice functions, because of its low density, it functions as an insulator. And consequently, it keeps the heat in the ecosystem below higher than if it weren't there at all. As a matter of fact, if ice did not form, likely life would not exist there because the temperature would drop significantly. Our flora in Klamath Falls has changed significantly due to global warming. Okay, how is this possible? Well, think about it. If you go back a decade when it used to snow a foot or two during the winter, that foot or two of snow on the ground actually functioned as an insulator and kept plants that were dormant in the soil alive. Now during winter, it doesn't snow at all, but the temperature still plummets. So that means that those poor seeds that are depending on insulation to survive the winter are not getting that insulation, and they're perishing, and they are failing to thrive, and they are no longer part of our normal fauna. And so our world is changing because we don't have snow during the winter anymore. To give you yet another example, think about it. Think about the Inuit. The Inuit, now they use hides to make their houses, but once upon a time they used to use igloos. Igloos were made out of ice. They would take a shovel. They would take the superficial snow off of the ice, and then they would cut the ice underneath into cubes, literally, and they would form a house, and then they would live inside the house. And you could think to yourself, that's ridiculous. No, as a matter of fact, they used to light fires inside these igloos, and they would be very cozy inside because that ice was functioning as an insulator. YouTube it sometime. Look at there's crazy people right now that literally build igloos still, and they'd love to show other people how to build igloos. So this lower density of ice is actually something that protects ecosystems in many parts of our world still. Okay. Water has an incredible capacity to absorb and retain heat. This is called a high specific heat capacity, and again, is due to hydrogen bonding. So, for example, if you had a liquid in which the molecules had no attraction to each other, and you added heat, that molecular motion would make the molecules just fly apart. But in water, there's that hydrogen bonding taking place. So as heat is added, the molecules move around and close to each other, but it takes a lot of heat for the hydrogen bonding to break and have these molecules fly off. Okay. Why do we care? Oh my goodness, we care a lot. Starting with our beautiful world. Okay. Let's say that you're in the moon where there is no atmosphere and no water. Okay. If you're in the sun, you're hot enough to be fried. If you're in the shadow, you're cold enough to be frozen. End of statement. But here on the Earth's atmosphere, that is not the case. And you might ask, how is that possible? Well, the answer is that during the day, when the sun comes out, the heat that's coming from the sun is being absorbed by the oceans in our world. So our oceans are functioning as a heat sink, taking all that heat from the sun during the day. So instead of having a temperature that just skyrockets up, our temperature here on Earth goes up nice and slow as the oceans function as a heat sink. And then something wonderful happens. The world turns and it becomes night. Huh? And now all that stored heat in the oceans gets released into the atmosphere and the temperature drops nice and slow. What a beautiful thing. So consequently, we end up living in a world where the temperature is almost constant due to the fact that the oceans function as a heat sink during the day and as a heat release during the night. Beautiful. But that's not all. Without the specific heat capacity of water, we would not exist. Okay? Why? Because the byproduct of every chemical reaction is heat. And like I just finished telling you, at the end of the day, these machines that we have, these bodies, they consist of trillions of chemical reactions. Trillions. And those trillions of chemical reactions, each one of them release heat. And if it were not for the high specific heat capacity of water, water would evaporate and we would cease to exist. As humans, as biological organisms, we need a solvent with a high heat capacity due to hydrogen bonding that can take all the beating that we give it. And then a lot of us aren't happy. Some of us choose that we're going to go play football on a nice sunny day, or we're going to go kayaking on a beautiful sunny day, or we're going to go sprint just because life can let us do that. The demands that we put on our bodies are incredible. If it was not for this specific heat capacity, the heat generated by these chemical reactions would be so great that our cells would just pop. They would just pop. They would just blow away. Instead, uh, water goes, meh. As a matter of fact, I'm going to help you along. I'm going to come onto the surface of your skin, and I'm going to evaporate and take that heat away from you. How incredible. So the high specific heat capacity of water is essential to keeping us and the earth buffered from the temperatures of the sun and the demands that we put in our body. Cohesion. So we address cohesion. Again, a consequence of hydrogen bonding is what causes water molecules to be cohesive with each other. A lot of people confuse this with the word adhesion. Cohesion is between water molecules. Adhesion is the association of water molecules with a non-water substance. That's adhesion. Um, but why do we care about cohesion and adhesion? Because both of those events are responsible for allowing plants to take up water from their roots, up their xylem and down their phloem passively. What does passively mean? Without expending energy. And if this doesn't blow your mind, it's probably because you haven't gone to the redwood forest where there's trees that are over, 206 feet high, and water's coming from the soil and traveling over 200 feet high into the air. and all of that is not requiring energy. That is mind blowing. So this ability of plants to draw water up into a column from the roots and into their leaves is what allows them to get water and get minerals and other nutrients that are essential to their survival. Very, very important. Okay. Okay. Hydrophobicity and hydrophilicity. So if you have um, a compound that is not polar, as an example, oil, non-polar, and you mix it with water, it will be repelled. Wax repels water as well. So when you're waxing your car, you're putting a water repellent on it. Okay. So hydrocarbons such as petroleum are examples of such hydrophobic compounds. Water cannot break down hydrophobic compounds, which is why oil and water don't mix. So if you're making a vinaigrette, oil and vinegar for your salad, you might take it and you're going to shake it and you're going to make what's called an emulsion. An emulsion is where small droplets of oil associate around small droplets of water. But at the end of the day, the emulsion is not a mixture of these two hydrophobic and hydrophilic substances. So here's an example of somebody collecting an oil spill. You can see that the oil remains on the surface of the water, so they can literally wrap it up and take it. Acids and bases. Here's the last topic. So by definition, an acid is any substance that yields hydrogen ions when put in aqueous solution. A base is any substance that accepts hydrogen ions in solution. That's key. That's important to remember. Okay. A base added to an acidic solution makes that solution less acidic. That's almost common sense, isn't it? An acid added to a basic solution makes that solution less basic. And your author shows you what would happen if you used a pH indicator like phenolphthalein. You would end up with water. If you add acid, it would turn red. If you added base, it would turn blue. Okay. And here, there's a little bit of a lie. If you combine them, it doesn't go to purple, it goes back to clear. I don't know why they're putting purple here. That's cute. But what happens if you mix equal amounts of each other, they neutralize each other. The pH goes back to 7, and it goes back to clear. It doesn't go to purple. This is a cute little illustration. Okay. Let's see. The pH scale goes between 0 and 14, with 0 being the most acidic and 14 being the most basic. 7 is considered neutral. Okay. Another thing that you need to, well, here, we're going to get to it. So battery acid, like what? Like sulfuric acid is less than 1. So it's very, very acidic. Hydrochloric acid, where would you find hydrochloric acid? In your stomach. Your stomach uses hydrochloric acid. So your stomach has a pH of 1. Lemon juice, about a pH of 2. Beer, wine, vinegar, cola, pH of 3. That, incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, is why you have to be careful with those people that drink too much beer or too much Pepsi or too much of this garbage. You have to be careful because the pH is low and they can end up hurting themselves. Okay. That's another reason for being careful with aspirin. So, there's those people that want to thin their blood so take an aspirin a day. It has to be the right size of an aspirin. Too little aspirin and your blood doesn't get thinned. Too much aspirin and you end up with a hole in your stomach. So you have to be careful with aspirin because it's a very, very strong acid. Tomatoes is about a 4. Black coffee is about a 5. Thank God, because I, I would bathe in coffee if it was possible. Urine is about a 6. Water, neutral, about a 7. Human blood is about between 7.35 and 7.45. So we're slightly alkaline. Baking soda is about 9. House ammonia, be very careful with this stuff, is about 11 and a half. Bleach, be very careful with this stuff, is about 2.5. And peroxide, not hydrogen peroxide, sodium hydroxide lye is a 14. Be very careful with this stuff. Okay. Now, hopefully you're noticing on here, here's a pH, here's a concentration in moles per liter. Okay. So if we go from urine to black coffee, a pH of 6 to 5, the concentration is 10 to a negative 6 to 10 to a negative 5. Okay. For those of you who don't feel comfortable with this math, what this is telling you is that a change in a pH of 1 increases the acidity 10 times. So when you go from 6 to 5, you're not increasing the acidity once, you're increasing it 10 times. 10 times. If we were to go from urine to tomatoes, from 6 to 4, you would be increasing the acidity 10 times 10, or 100 times. So this is a reason why people get confused on the pH scale. They think that a change of 1 is a small potato. It's not. The pH scale is logarithmic. So a change of 1 on the pH is a change of 10 in the concentration. So if I was to go from urine to wine, that would be a difference of 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000 times. That is a little bit scary. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Most things function best near neutral. Exceptions to this, of course, are enzymes in our stomach that are accustomed to being in acidic environments. Those enzymes typically function best at acidic pHs. But for the most part, this is true. Most enzymes, most of our body functions optimally at near, well, slightly alkali, right? Because remember, our blood pH is between 7.35 and 7.45. So what does this mean? This means that we have to have a buffering system. And with us, the buffering system is the blood, lungs, and kidneys that helps us maintain this pH between 7.35 and 7.45. If you cannot keep the blood pH between these two, that individual is not going to be compatible with life for very long. Okay. So this is why we are frightened when we have people that have COPD, or or they go into ketoacidosis and diabetes type 2, or these things, because in both of those events, you end up making the blood extremely acidic, and this range is not going to change. So if you're making the blood acidic, you're just moving yourself closer and closer to death. And the body's trying to do everything it can to help you. There's buffers in your blood that are trying to maintain this. The lungs are trying to help you. The kidneys are trying to help you. So at the end of the day, if your body is not in a good range in this pH, you need to help it. Okay. And that is it. What do you guys think? I hope I didn't bore you too much. I had a little bit of fun because I got to use new toys in this presentation. So, anyways, that's it for now. I hope you had a good weekend, and I'll see you soon. Okay. Bye bye.